Hi, my name is Sarah Morand, and in most of my videos I talk about reading through the Harvard Classics collection, but I decided I wanted to make a video that talks about some of my favorite winter reads, book recommendations, and so that's what I'll be talking about in this video. Winter is definitely here, where I live at least. There's probably a few inches of snow on the ground. It's I think we've had 2 or 3 snow showers already this year, and it's only going to get worse from here on out, because definitely December is just like barely when it starts to snow where I live. So I'm definitely cozying up for winter. I have all my blankets out, the Christmas tree is up. It's time for winter, and with that comes winter reading. I do a lot of reading in the winter because it's too cold to do much else. And I especially like to focus on cozier books, books that are kind of nostalgic for me, or that I don't have to think quite so hard about. I do like to read the academic type books as well during this season, but I especially like to reread books that I have already read and loved. And I think winter is a really great time to do that, to kind of just bring some comfort during the cold weather. And there's no better time for reading, I think, than being able to, I'm blessed enough to have a wood stove, so I can sit in front of the fire and have a, hot tea or coffee or something and just enjoy a good book and look out at the miserable weather outside. I love the snow, but I definitely love it better when I can look at it through a window. So all that being said, I wanted to share some of my favorite winter reads with all of you, and hopefully encourage you to pick up a new book or a book that you've read before that you really enjoyed, to kind of bring you some comfort in the cold, wintry weather. First of all, I'm going to start with one that I feel like a lot of people associate, the movies at least, with this season. A lot of people rewatch the movies, do a little bit of a marathon in the cold weather, and they associate it with like Christmas movie marathon. And I also would associate the books with this time of year, and that of course is the Lord of the Rings series. I find these books, any fantasy books really, I tend to gravitate more towards during the winter weather. I love fantasy all year, but especially this time of year, I really love escaping to a different world and having that element as well. One book series that I didn't include in this video, that now that I'm talking about this book reminds me of course the Narnia series, which definitely is a wintry type read, especially the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And that one's also a great one. I don't read those books as often, so I don't tend to think about them as much, but that one should definitely be on this list as well. But Lord of the Rings, perfect adventure story. It's long, so as you're having the cold weather and you're stuck inside, it's a good time to get through these books or reread the books. And it's definitely kind of a adventure, but it's also brings back this feeling of nostalgia that I think is important for winter reads to some extent. And the Lord of the Rings series, I feel like, does that better than any other. And right now, my dad and I are watching the Lord of the Rings movies. We like the Rings of Power TV show, and so I'm definitely in the Lord of the Rings mood at the moment. So I probably will be rereading these fairly soon, at least. And then I also have an edition of the Fall of Numenor. That's one of the posthumously published works of J.R.R. Tolkien that I have yet to read, so I will be getting into that as well. But the entire Lord of the Rings series is a great winter read. The next book I have on the list is a little unorthodox, but in my brain I always associate it with winter, because the first time I read it was over Christmas break when I was in middle school, and I read it in like 2 days and I couldn't put it down, and then it sent me into this like depression for the rest of the winter break, this reading slump, because I was just in shock after finishing it. And that book is Ender's Game. Not the traditional winter read, but in my brain I always associate it with winter because of the first time I read it. And I do find that, especially like these mass market paperback editions, are great short little reads. And I love how they feel in your hand. They're like the perfect size. And I just think Ender's Game is a good action book. It's good pacing. It's very exciting. It's very unique. I've never read another book quite like Ender's Game. And when I read it in middle school, it absolutely shocked me, the twists and turns and all of that. And I just really recommend this book. I'm not a huge science fiction reader, but I think of all the science fictions I have read, Ender's Game is still my favorite. And I think that it's a great little short book to read over the Christmas break. But, you know, if you haven't read it before, and you don't know the twist at the end, I'm assuming most people do at this point because it's been out for a long time. Even though it had been out for a long time when I read it, I still did not know the twist, so it completely took me by surprise. But if you have not read it and you don't know the twist, then be prepared to have a few days where you're just in absolute shock after having read it. But I definitely still would recommend it as a good winter read. And hopefully it won't traumatize other people as it did middle school me. The next book I have on my list, I'm going to be talking about two books. I have a physical copy of one of them, and then the other one I don't have a physical copy of at the moment. But it would be, the first one is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This is a great classic. It's an anti-romance, I consider it. It's a romance, but it's such a toxic romance that it's like the thing that you absolutely would not want to happen. And the back of the Penguin Classics edition, Jeanette Winterson, who I actually don't know who that is, but her review was, Wuthering Heights is commonly thought of as romantic, but try rereading it without being astonished by the extremes of physical and psychological violence. It's a violent book, and the characters are all awful. They're awful to each other, except for, like, the one neighbor who happens to get dragged into hearing this chaotic story from his neighbors that he doesn't even know. He gets wrapped up in it, and I always feel so sorry for that guy. But Wuthering Heights, I think I read this. It's a little less than, it's about 300 pages. I think I read it in one day because I just could not put it down. I was so engaged in it, and it's such a good book. It's so well written. It's definitely a little disturbing, and it's definitely not a romance. I would consider this definitely not a romance, even though some people do consider it a romance. To me, it's more of a thriller type book, and the Bronte sisters did that really well. And I just think that this book kind of has a wintry feeling to it, maybe because the characters are so cold, and I think it's a great book to read in wintertime. I know, like, winter, a lot of people would lean more towards romance stuff. I know my grandma always used to watch the Hallmark movies nonstop, and so I grew up with, like, the winter romance type thing, and I like those type of things enough, but I'm not a huge fan of, especially the Hallmark type ones, because I feel like they're poorly written to some extent, which to some people that's kind of the appeal of it, is like it's the same fun plot over and over again. But I digress. The point is that Wuthering Heights is not a romance, but it does give that kind of a feel in a twisted way. And for some reason, when I think of this book, I think of wintertime, and I find that it's a good winter read. The other book I have on that list is, that I don't have a physical copy of, but I have read, is Jane Eyre. And that was also written, I can't remember which sister wrote that one, but it was also written by a Bronte sister, I believe. And that book also that one's more of a romance than Wuthering Heights, but it still has some twisted elements in it. And I read it miraculously, I didn't really have it spoiled for me, even though it was written like in the 1800s or whatever. I didn't really know what was going to happen, and so it read as kind of a thriller for me, and it was a great read. And I do think the first time I read it, it was in the winter time, because I distinctly remember heading up to making a little bit of a long drive up to a ski hill to ski for the day, and in the car reading my ebook version of Jane Eyre. And that's such an odd little experience in my brain that's connected to Jane Eyre now, so maybe that's why I think of it as a winter read. But again, I feel like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, they both portray this kind of cold aspect to their books. Jane Eyre especially, the Jane has experienced things in her youth and throughout her lifetime where she is kind of this light in a very dark world. And it's a very interesting book. I found that I liked Wuthering Heights better because it's definitely more action-packed, I think. But Jane Eyre is very powerful and meaningful, and I do associate it with winter, just like I do Wuthering Heights. So those two I find are great books in the romance, not really category, I guess. Other times of the year I might say something like Pride and Prejudice or something like that. But definitely Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre are on the winter list of reads. The next book I have is Babel by R.F. King. I'm sure that I'm mispronouncing her name. She's a fantastic writer. This is a modern book. I'm sure most people probably have heard of it because it was super popular, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago when it came out. And I finally picked it up, and I was like, I wanted kind of a moody book. It sounded interesting to me. It's about these Oxford translators, but there's like magic involved in the world building, and words hold incredible power, and it's a very unique premise and a really interesting book, and it takes place in like Oxford for the most part of the book. And so it definitely, to me, when I think of Oxford, I think of like Christmas and wintertime. I don't know why that's the first thing that comes to my mind, but it does. And so I picked up Babel, and I actually got it, I think, during like a Black Friday sale or something. It's a massive book. I was waiting for it to go on sale because it was quite expensive beforehand. And I did end up reading it during the winter time. I think it took me several months to finish this because it's very heavy subject matter that gets discussed. And so I kind of was reading a little bit here, a little bit there. I wasn't speeding through it like on my other books. And although this is a more modern book, it's written in a similar style to classics. It's very poetic writing, very beautiful prose, and so it's not something that you just speed through. It's not conversational. And so it took me several months to read it. I think I read it between the months of December over a Christmas break and February. I loved it. It was a great book. I like how it starts. Each chapter starts with a quote from something, usually a literary work or a work that was written by like a translator talking about translation, things like that. It's very action-packed. It deals with heavy topic matters like racism and things like that. The characters cause problems a lot. It happens. And it kind of leads to this revolt type thing. And it's an oddly paced book, but I still liked it a lot. Like, the main action part is only in the last, like, maybe 2 parts of this book, and I think it's, like, 4 or 5 parts. But I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend it. It's a good winter read. These moodier type books, this whole, like, dark academia type book, I think they make really good winter reads just because they're moody. They usually involve some kind of mystery element, and I really like them. And I really liked Babel. I think it's a great book, and it's a hefty book, so if you're looking for a read to last you most of the winter, then I would suggest this one. It's really good. The next one I want to talk about is, I don't have a copy of it because I usually get audiobooks or ebooks for this, but I think in the wintertime, in general, I'm a mystery reader. I like reading mysteries. I love, Wild West type mysteries. I like Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle. I like mysteries. And I don't often gravitate towards Agatha Christie when I think of mysteries. Usually, I'm not a huge Agatha Christie reader. I much prefer Arthur Conan Doyle. But Agatha Christie, to me, is associated with winter. For some reason, whole books I think of during the wintertime, and I want to read during the wintertime. She wrote some really fantastic mysteries like Murder on the Orient Express and A Midwinter Murder, I think is what it was called, that took place in the wintertime that I found were really good wintertime mysteries, I guess. And just the kind of mystery that she writes, I think, works really well with the wintertime. It's very character driven. It's very kind of Hercule Poirot. Those are the ones that I read of hers. I don't really read Miss Marple. I love Hercule Poirot, and I find that as a detective, he's a great detective to follow when you want a lighter type mystery. He's kind of an interesting character, and I always love in the books his obsession with hot chocolate. Like, he always drinks hot chocolate, and to me that makes me think of winter as well. Very interesting character, and I love Agatha Christie mysteries during this time of the year. The next book I have on this list is definitely in like the direct opposite direction from like Agatha Christie and modern mystery type things, and that would be Beowulf. I read it first as an ebook, which I would not recommend. I would recommend getting a physical copy, because it's definitely a difficult read, and it's nice to be able to flip back and forth easily. And the physical copy I have at the moment now is in the Harvard Classics collection, and it's in the volume 49, so it'll be a long time before I read it again in this collection, because I'm only on volume 6 and 7 right now. Beowulf, I feel like the reason I think of it in wintertime is more so the setting. It's kind of a Scandinavian type setting. It definitely is a harsher epic than I would consider than like Greek epics. I definitely think Beowulf is more of a winter read in my mind. I would not recommend it if you're new to reading classics, or if you're not into like really difficult reads, because I struggled with it a lot, and actually I'm looking forward to reading it again and hopefully understanding it a bit better. I might see if I can find a summary of it to better understand it before I read it again. But what I did understand of it, I really enjoyed, and I thought it was a great read, and very exciting, very adventurous, and definitely a great winter read. Okay, and then the last books I have in this collection are Fyodor Dostoevsky, and I have two books in specific, but largely I would just say any Russian literature, really, I feel like is great for reading in the winter time. Leo Tolstoy, I'm not as big of a Tolstoy reader, but I have read a few of his works, and I would say that all of the Russian authors, it might just be kind of the setting that makes me think of it, but also like the characters and things like that really make me think of wintertime, and I really feel like they're great winter reads to get into. And just the way that especially Dostoevsky paints his environment in his stories is really something special. The two books I have from Dostoevsky that I would specifically recommend for this time of the year is, first of all, Crime and Punishment. I kind of have an odd cover. It's not like the standard penguin cover that people recognize, I guess. But Crime and Punishment, I think, is a is very winter forward. The main character, Raskolnikov, is in St. Petersburg. I haven't read it in a while, so I'm kind of referencing the back here. I believe he was in St. Petersburg. He, spoiler alert, but if you don't know this about Crime and Punishment, then would be surprised. He commits this murder, and he's kind of hiding it and reasoning with himself why what he did was right and all of this stuff. And to me, this book is very heavy, and it's very thriller-esque, and you're in the mind of the murderer, which is really interesting. And probably not for everybody. Not everybody would enjoy a book like that. But I did find that Crime and Punishment was really good, and I think that it definitely feels like a winter read to me. And this, more than any Dostoevsky book, really feels like it belongs in the winter season to be read. And then the other Dostoevsky book I have is probably the thickest book in this whole selection of books that I've chosen, which is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I love this book. This is my favorite book of all time, by the way. I've annotated this copy. There's quite a bit in there. I love The Brothers Karamazov so much. The characters, the story, it all comes together to be, in my opinion, the perfect book. And I know that it's not for everyone. It's a thick book. It's very character-driven. The plot is a little slow at points. There's like this whole section towards the back that kind of feels a little out of place until you get to the very end, and then it makes sense. But it could almost be its own separate book. And so it's kind of a weird book in many ways. But I believe it's Dostoevsky's swan song. It's an amazing book. It's my favorite. And I think of it when I think of winter. Part of it is, again, I read this book for the first time during the winter season. And I associate it with that. But also, I find that the theme of the book, good versus evil, and the main character, well, one of the main characters, the primary main character, Alyosha, is dealing with this trouble within his family. His brothers all corrupt and have their own vices and are in not good situations. His father is a monster, pretty much, and is really hurting the family and causing division. And there's all these side characters who all have their roles that they play, and it's a very flushed out book, and there's a lot going on and a lot of characters and a large story that's being told throughout the narrative of this book. And it takes place, the setting, Russia. To me, a lot of the time that gravitates more towards winter reads in my brain. But I definitely would recommend it. If you're looking for a project book, then The Brothers Karamazov is a great book. And personally, I think everybody should read it once in their lifetime. So that's why I'm ending on this one, my absolute favorite book of all time, that I also tend to associate with a winter read. There's so many more books that I could talk about. I actually had a more difficult time figuring out what books I associate with winter in this video than I did in the video I made about fall reads, because I think a lot of the books that I tend to gravitate towards tend to lean more towards the fall side of things. But I definitely enjoy reading in the winter a lot. And all of these books I've talked about today are books that either I've read in the winter and hence associate with winter, or they kind of have that winter feeling to them. Cold and mysterious and very poignant works. And I just would recommend everybody to pick up a book this winter and find a book that you have loved in the past that you want to reread, that you haven't had time to reread, or find a new book that just makes you think of the winter season, or that you have been putting off reading that you want to get to. I would just recommend that everybody pick up a book this winter, no matter which one. And if I've missed any winter reading suggestions that you guys think should be included in this video, please let me know, because I know that this list is not thorough, and I would like to hear what other people suggest as winter reads, and what you associate with winter reads. If you totally disagree with any of the books on this list as a winter type book, then also comment that, because I don't know, in my brain, I know that like Ender's Game is really weird as a book in this video, but also just like if you have a book that's not a winter read that you associate with the season because you read it this time of year, leave it in the comments. I'm always looking for new book recommendations, so really making these videos is kind of my way of saying, give me more recommendations so I have more books to read. Anyway, I hope that you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Check out some of my other videos, especially like the Harvard Classics collection if that's something you're interested in. And I will see you in the next video.